Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And we are rejoined by Arnold August. Arnold is a Montreal-based author of 3 books on Cuba, U.S., Latin America. He's also also part of no. He's also the award-winning journalist of the Cuban Union of Journalists Awards. He's a contributing editor for the Canada Files, and he's had articles published in English, Spanish, and French in North and South America, Europe, and India. He's often a frequent television commentator for Telesur, Press TV, and many others. And before I say hi to him, we're going to be discussing on this shorter edition of One Plus One a very interesting investigative article he did for the Canada Files called Inside Cuban Dissidents, November 15 Plot, Unpacking the Archipiélago Facebook group, and which was published November the 9th, 2021. Arnold, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for coming back on the program.
It's a pleasure for me to be with you once again, Youri.
Likewise, it's a real honor to have you. So Arnold, let's get into it. So tell us about this article of yours, and tell us about this Cuban dissident group that you joined on Facebook called the Archipiélago group. What did you uncover about them, and what makes them a serious concern for us anti-imperialist folk who want the U.S. and its allies to back off Cuba and to let Cuba breathe?
Well, the first thing is, why did I decide to apply to become a member of that group? The main reason is that the mainstream media, Canada, United States, Europe, all over the world, has been hammering away saying that this group, this movement is very peaceful. Oh, peace and love and all that. Oh, it's so peaceful. For example, the leader of this group, Junior Garcia, we see him peering out of the window of his house with the mariposa white flower, which is the national flower of Cuba. See how peaceful these guys are? This is the image portrayed by the mainstream media. But in addition to this, Youri, I think you'll appreciate it. Unfortunately, you have some people on the left, friends of Cuba, inside Cuba and abroad, who basically provide the same narrative. But of course, the group is neutered and it's gaslighted by saying, well, the Archipiélago group is an umbrella group of dissident cultural personalities. And Junior Garcia is just a famous playwright, but that is not really the case. We will see what kind of a playwright he is. So I decided to apply to become a member. Some people may ask, how come they let you in? I don't know. I think their main reason is they want to get as many members involved in that group, so they just accept everyone. And in my case, if they did check my profile on Facebook, they will see that I have 2 books with the title Democracy in Cuba. So these guys, they're so convinced that their view on democracy in Cuba is so widespread. So, oh, this guy is with us. He's also denouncing the so-called the dictatorship in Cuba and wanting to have democracy in Cuba. They got their signals mixed, but in any case, I was accepted. Very good. So I started to look through this trove of posts and all that. And the main important thing I would like to share with you, Youri, and people who are watching is that that Facebook group, far from being, an innocent umbrella of actors and cultural workers, it is in favor of a lot violent overthrow of the Cuban government. Let me give you some examples. In their Facebook page, and all these, of course, I made sure I got screenshots all of them. People can see that in the article that I think you're probably going to put online. Yeah. You see pictures, someone with a selfie on top of an overturned car, and then there's something else. For example, they give as an example of demonstration taken from the demonstrations in Venezuela in 2014 and 2017, known as the guarimbas, or barricades that they set up with burning rubber tires. And in 2014 alone, there were 43 people killed by them as a result of the so-called peaceful protests. And in 2017, another 121 were killed. They were so violent that they would just see someone, say, this guy seems to me as a Chavista, and they just burned him alive. This has actually been recorded. This is just one example. Let's go on to another. For example, on the issue of the blockade, they would say that at one point, Biden issued some more decrees against Cuba as a result of the demonstrations, specifically sanctions against individuals. What was the reaction of this so-called peaceful umbrella group? They said, well, of course, it's good that you have some sanctions against individuals, but you have to go further. You have to have more sanctions to help us bring down that government. Peaceful? And we could, I could provide you with many others, but this is, there are graphics throughout that Facebook page depicting conflict between what we would say, I guess, police and people. And there are other such activities. It's just replete with hatred and violence. For example, at one point, someone posted the following an entry into that group saying that we should have the demonstration on November 15th that was coming up, but we should also have it every month. So someone in this umbrella group responded saying, well, once a month is not enough. We should have it every week because, and I'm quoting, the dictatorship will die more quickly if we have these activities every week. So it just gives you an idea that, how violent they are. I'd just like to add one point is that the amount of hatred and defamation of character and ridiculing Fidel Castro is so omnipresent and violent that it's even worse than the Miami press when they write about Fidel Castro. So these and other examples show that this is very far from being a peaceful umbrella group. Now, you want to go on to your second question now?
Yes. Actually, that's a perfect segue then to my second question, which is, talk to us about one of the administrators of this group and one of the members, I believe, which was in this group. So there's and forgive me if I'm butchering their names. So there's Junior Garcia Aguilera and Ramon Ramon Saúl Sanchez, both who've been long-time U.S.-backed Cuban, both who have been part of the long-term U.S.-backed Cuban dissident groups, and the latter was an actual terrorist. So talk to us about those two.
Yeah, Ramon, that's a very important feature that I uncovered in navigating through this Facebook page. Now, Ramon Saúl, he called. We have that recording. It was the leaked recording. He telephoned Junior Garcia from Miami. He said, hey, we fully support the activity that you're doing. And we are going to support you all along. This is coming from someone who has been a convicted terrorist, even according to American laws. And then there's another interesting post in Facebook in which it says, we need the support of the exile community in Miami. Youri, that is a euphemism. Exile community in Miami is a euphemism for terrorists, the ones who organized the Bay of Pigs in 1961 and have as a specific goal the violent overthrow of the government and annexing Cuba to the United States.
So it's not a benign term when they say we need the help of Cuban exiles.
Yeah, they say we should not say that we're mercenaries or they're mercenaries, because anyone who helps our cause is not a mercenary. We welcome with open arms. So, I guess those academics who say that it's a wide umbrella, they're right in a sense, because it includes all of the anti-communist terrorist groups and activities in Miami and elsewhere who want to overthrow the government.
So talk to us a bit more about So talk to us a bit more about Junior Aguilera.
Mm. Well, this whole thing started back in November 2009, 2020, when he and other so-called artists organized a sort of provocative activity in front of the Cuban Ministry of Culture in Havana. They were complaining about a new law that was being discussed amongst the people, decree law number 354, which the goal was to encompass and define and elaborate the policy of the government with regards to culture. Now, these guys didn't like that because they want to be completely free, liberated from any constraint with regards to culture, so they could, put on these shows and activities that go against the Cuban government. I was covering that very closely, this Bill 354 in Cuba when it was going on. I said to myself, wow, I would love to have this in Quebec, a bill that protects Quebec culture from the influence of the United States and other parts of the world. So this is how he became famous during that activity back then. And of course, it carried on into the July 11 protests. And since then, of course, he has become the face, as they say, of that Facebook page.
Okay, and talk to us a bit more about Ramon Sanchez and some of the terrorist activities that he was involved with.
Well, he was involved in, for example, bombing consulates in the United States and killing people. Also involved, I believe, in trying to keep Elie Gonzalez, who was a young boy who was shipwrecked off Miami and kept in Miami by force by his family. He fully supported them on this occasion. And there are many other activities, actual terrorist activities that he carried on, not only in the United States, but elsewhere in South America. And of course, he fully supported and sympathized with the bombing of the Cuban airline off Bahamas several years ago, which wiped out all of the people on that plane. So he is, I guess you would say, the epitome of what a terrorist is. And the bottom line, Youri, that these guys have these, friendly conversations. What a great wide umbrella of all different factions.
And
the common denominator is against the Canadian government by any means necessary, even violence.
But did he also attack a Cuban consulate or a Cuban embassy in the part of Quebec that you're based in, Montreal?
Yes, he's responsible for that as well, and someone was killed. So there's a whole list of all of his activities that he carried on as a professional terrorist.
And did he ever serve any jail time for any of these activities?
That's the thing. He did service. I think he served a few months in jail. He was definitely convicted as a terrorist. So anyone who says, "Well, we're really harsh on him because we're just alleging, we're just saying that he's a terrorist," he was actually convicted as a terrorist in the United States.
And how long did he serve for the crimes that he did?
I'm not sure exactly, but I think he served a very short period of time, of course, several months, I believe.
Wow, incredible. And talk to us about how this group, the Archipiélago group, is trying to appeal, which you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, to left-leaning folk, and by using slogans such as "defund the police." And give us another example of their efforts to appeal to left-leaning folks, such as Aguilera saying he's against ideological apartheid, savage capitalism, and he
Mhm.
complained that there are no left or right dictatorships, just dictatorships, and the left should be opposed to dictatorships.
In fact, Yuri, that was the, aside from the obvious violent nature of the group, the other thing that caught my attention as I spent, several weeks navigating through the whole thing, is they actually try to portray themselves to a certain extent as being from the left. For example, they would have photographs of Martin Luther King. They would even quote Fidel Castro in part saying that, the part that says, we have to change everything that has to be changed. Of course, they left out the first part of that quote from Fidel, in which he says, revolution means everything, we change everything that has to be changed in order to preserve the revolution, not what these dissidents are saying, that we have to change everything to overthrow the revolution. And they also have at one point a call, because they're against the police, we should take up the slogan of defund the police, as took place in the United States. Now, what is important that Junior Garcia, so-called famous playwright, had an extensive interview with who else? Miami Herald, and there he laid it out very clear. And it's important for people to keep in mind that if there's a certain amount of success, it's because they are trying to use the card of being on the left. So what he wrote in that thing is that he wants to have an alliance of those who oppose the government in Venezuela, Bolivia, Cuba, and Nicaragua. This is his basic call. Secondly, he says that he appeals, he wrote this is written black and white, I'm appealing to the left all over the world to support us, because the Cuban government is not left, it's not socialist, etc. And at the same time, he says, we're against the Cuban government, but we're against savage capitalism. So you have all this using words to provide, to give the impression that he's against the government, but he's also coming at it from the left. Now, the point is that this has been picked up to a certain extent from some people in the left, academics in Cuba and otherwise. And he's not that stupid. They have this very specific orientation for appealing to the left, because they know this is sort of a soft spot among certain sections of friends of Cuba, of the left in the United States and perhaps Europe, because using the word repression and all that, not everyone is so solid to appreciate that when they talk about repression in Cuba, it's not what the Cubans, this is not how the Cubans see it. If the Cubans surround the house or the apartment of these mercenaries and call them out for what they are doing, which is basically to create incidents in order to provide a pretext for the United States to intervene, even militarily, in order to annex Cuba to the United States. So when they denounce them verbally, never physically, for them, this is not oppression. It's not nothing to do with repression. For them, it's liberation. They're asserting themselves.
Yeah.
As Cuban revolution, they are asserting the Cuban revolution, that we have every right to maintain it. And you guys who are working with the United States, you better watch out, because they're not going to allow you to create incidents in order to provide the United States with a pretext to interfere and overthrow the government in Cuba. Of course, like when these guys asked for Junior and others asked for permission from the local municipality to have what they call this peaceful demonstration, they based that on an article in the Cuban Constitution that says, that Article 56, that says Cubans have a right to have peaceful demonstrations in Cuba. Yes, but they didn't quote the other part of that same Article 56, which indicates people have a right to protest, demonstrate peacefully, as long as it does not violate the norms and the laws of the land. And of course, which is normal. I mean, even all constitutions have that type of thing, but in a different way. And of course, these dissidents, they did not refer to Article 4. You know what? Because Article 4 indicates, and this was adopted by the Cuban people, Article 4 indicates that socialism in Cuba is irrevocable. One cannot overthrow socialism in Cuba. Someone may say, oh, well, this is really arbitrary. The Cuban government declares that socialism is irrevocable. But how did that come about? The Cubans participated in a very widespread consultation in 2009 to upgrade their constitution. And in that constitution, they agreed to have Article 4 defending socialism as the basis of the society. Now, in that constitutional referendum, they participated in the suggestions, and then it went to them for them to discuss and eventually to vote upon. And 84% of the Cuban population voted in that referendum in 2019. And of that 84%, over 86% agreed with the Constitution, including that article that Cuba is socialist and forget about it, you can't change it, and including another article that says that the long-term goal of Cuba is communism. So this is what the Cubans are defending. They are aware of it. And if they take it upon themselves to call out peacefully these guys when they see them, it's my view, their right to do so. And I think I'm working on another article now, should be out in a day or two. I will explain in detail how this became the main reason for the defeat of their goal to have a massive demonstration on November 15th.
Interesting. And that's a perfect segue, which is, you mentioned Aguilera speaking to the Miami Herald. Can you talk about how corporate media outlets like the Miami Herald and the Washington Post, while they slam any protest for social and racial justice in the U.S., and they scoff at the idea of defund the police, they lionize violent protests in Cuba, like the overturning of cars, which has happened yet when we have actual protests or Asian provocateurs, they'll simply denounce the entire movement and weaponize those incidents regardless of the context. And talk to us about that, because that's a very good window into how propaganda operates in the US, Canada, and its allies.
It's so blatant, Youri. I gave you the example of Venezuela in 2014, 2017, close to 150 people killed. Even while that was going on, the Secretary of State, I believe it was Kerry for Obama at that time, said, well, these peaceful demonstrations that are going on in Venezuela, peaceful demonstrations, they're killing people, So you're right. I mean,
exactly. You mentioned they burned the guy alive.
It's so arbitrary, They keep on repeating that what has been going on in Cuba on July 11th and other attempts since then, they're peaceful demonstrations. And, I dove into that Facebook group to show very clearly that is far from being peaceful. It is not an umbrella group of artists and all that, some kind of an innocent, peace and love type of thing, whatever. It's actually an instrument in the hands of the United States for regime change. Now, the fact, like when they write in their Facebook page, we should have demonstrations every week, so this way the government will die quickly. So that they're actually in favor of regime change. Now, did you ever hear, Youri, of regime change that is peaceful? Regime change means overthrowing the government, and that's what it's all about. And I think that I'm going into in this article that I'm about to finish today or tomorrow, going into how come they fail. It's a very important reason. Don't ask me how, because I want to keep it as a surprise when my article comes out I think it's going to have an impact on people who are interested in Cuba.
But is it safe to say that the archipelago group and other U.S. Canadian backed dissident groups, what is it safe to say that they're trying to provoke the Cuban government to do a violent response? So therefore, they'll have they'll have knowingly agent provocateurs who will overturn a car, try to pick out a fight with one of the Cuban authorities. And if they do, of course, if they do overturn a car, if they do intentionally break a window, the police has to respond to that. So they're trying to provoke the Cuban government into a violent response, to which their friends in Univision, Miami Herald, or Washington Post go, see, the Cuban government is cracking down on peaceful protesters.
Yes, it's exactly, that is the game plan, Youri. In the July 11th, there was looting. Rocks were thrown at police. Cars were overthrown. And, to provide a narrative to the United States and some people on the left that, because Cuba responded by arresting some of those people who carry this out. Oh, there's repression in Cuba. These guys are being arrested for having looted a store or overthrew a car and all that. So the whole thing is a setup to say, look, Cuba is a communist dictatorship. They're repressing. There's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of assembly in Cuba and all that. That is the overall setup that they use, but it's so arbitrary. When the same thing we have this for example, United States, when you have the uprising with regards to George Floyd, you have so many people who demonstrated, millions of people demonstrated over a long period of time, and they always try to make a dividing line between peaceful demonstrators and outside agitator or violent demonstrators.
And they'll slander Antifa like that.
Yeah, exactly. So all this thing is completely arbitrary. The question of peace and love and all that.
All right, and we're almost out of time, but I did want to talk about. Yeah, we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you this question, which is, what are the latest happening in Cuba? Are there still anti-government protests happening? Have there been a lot of counter-protests, people who are still in favor of the current system, but may want some reforms? Have there been counter-protests against the Western-backed protests? And if there haven't been that much Western-backed protests, what do you credit that with?
Well, I'll keep this very short because I hope you understand. I don't want to spill the beans with regard to my article coming out, say, tomorrow.
Yes.
But the basic thing for the audience now was that they had this big thing going for November 15th, right? This demonstration that was supposed to be the mother of all demonstrations and supported all over the world. It completely failed. It never took place. It was a disaster. It never took place. And not only that, the group that was at the head of that, this umbrella group, I guess there must have been holes in their umbrella, because that group has actually fallen apart after the November 15 debacle. People have resigned.
The Archipiélago group.
Yeah, right. Like, for example, Youri Garcia fled to Madrid. He's so suppressed in his house, as a prisoner in his house, supposedly, but he managed to get out and fly to Madrid to save his soul. Now, that's not all, Youri. Some of the people in that group were angry at him. They say, you sold out, you went to Madrid, and here we are still fighting and all that. So people resigned one after the other. So what you have, to make a long story short, you actually have the implosion of that great umbrella group. It's falling apart, and there has been no violent or no other activities by this group against the Cuban government. So that was a very important victory by the Cuban government, and hope people will have a chance to read the article, which should be published in a day or two, on why did it fail. The title of that article is Why did it fail?
And we're gonna have to, and we're gonna have to have you come back to discuss that. I'm gonna. There was a question I wanted to ask you about the dreams of the Cuban dissident groups who want Cuba to basically be part of the United States, or to have a colonial relationship like Puerto Rico. But I'm going to save that for another time and just
Okay.
ask and just ask you briefly if it's possible. Now, if you could talk to, because in your article about the Archipelago group, you criticized Rabble, Canadian Dimension, and the breach for their anti-Cuba stances, but a lot of their sort of soft imperial stances. So if you could talk to them about, if you could have the chance to talk to them about why they should be defending Cuba from Western efforts, and why they should drop this whole both sides the floor is yours. What would you say to them?
Well, just in a word, this both sidism, which expresses itself in the following way: oh, we're against the violent people from that Facebook group who looted and carried out violent activity, but we're also against the crackdown by the Cuban government. That's the word that they use. The buzzword for these opportunists from the left: crackdown by the Cuban government. It is the same word used by the Canadian government and the American government. So this both-sidism, in my view, is more dangerous than the one-sidism of the State Department, because it's coming from the so-called left and provides, like through outlets such as The Breach, Canadian Dimension, and Rabble, through several articles that they carried there, provides some credibility to the US-led mainstream narrative that in Cuba there is repression, people have no freedom of assembly, no freedom of speech. That's what it's all about. And that's why I think it's important that people, that we, for example, the Canada Files and others who join with us, that we call out not only the ruling circle, not only the mainstream media, but also, if you like, the mainstream so-called left media, which has a very soft stance on the US, and invariably, based on their lack of ideological and political clarity, basically fall right into the basic mainstream narrative, in this case, against Cuba.
All right. Well, on this, we're going to have to leave it there on this much shorter edition of 1+1. We were joined by Arnold August, the brilliant Canadian journalist and historian, often a frequent guest on Telesur, and he's the associate editor of the Canada Files, right, Arnold?
No, contributing editor.
Contributing.
I'm pretty busy. Don't give me any more.
Contributing editor
Right.
to the Canada Files, and author of several very important books that, if everyone wants to know everything that they need to know about Cuba and U.S. relations, they should get Arnold's books. Arnold, thank you so much for joining me today on such short notice. And before I end, I just want to say to everyone that I'll be on a Christmas break for the rest of the month, and I should be gone for a lot of January, but 1+1 will be back with its third season sometime in January or February. And until then, I want to wish Arnold, all of our guests, past and present, and to you, the 1+1 audience, a very Merry Christmas, a very Happy New Year, and Happy Holidays if Christmas is not the one you celebrate. So that's all. Ciao till then.
Thank you for having me. It's been a
Likewise.
pleasure.